They tried to drag him out of the seat while the plane was still boarding. Not security. Not police. 2 gate supervisors in navy blazers, hands shaking, voices tight, telling him to stand up right now, because the captain had made a decision. Around them, phones rose like periscopes. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "This is insane." The man didn't move. He didn't argue. He didn't even look angry. He just stayed seated, hands flat on his thighs, breathing slow, as if the chaos unfolding inches from his face belonged to another world. The jet bridge door stood open behind them, letting in a blade of cold morning air and the distant roar of engines. Somewhere outside, a tug beeped twice. Inside the cabin, everything felt compressed. Sound, oxygen, patience. A woman in the aisle seat across from him clutched her purse with both hands. Her knuckles were white. She kept glancing between his face and the men crowding him, like she was watching a car accident in slow motion and couldn't decide where to look. "Sir," one of the supervisors said again, louder now, forcing authority into his voice. "You are refusing a direct instruction from the flight deck." The man finally looked up. His eyes were steady, dark, tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. "I haven't refused anything," he said. Calm, even, American. "I asked for an explanation." The supervisor swallowed. He didn't answer that. He couldn't. 15 minutes earlier, none of this existed. The morning at Logan had started the way mornings always did for people who thought time belonged to them. The first-class lounge smelled like burnt coffee and lemon disinfectant. TVs murmured financial news nobody was really watching. A cluster of older men in tailored jackets argued quietly about interest rates, their voices sharp, competitive, familiar. Across the room, the man now being cornered on the plane had sat alone by the window, a paper cup cooling in his hand. His jacket was plain, dark charcoal, no logo, no shine. He watched the tarmac the way other people watched the ocean, with focus, with patience, with a sense that movement always meant something. When the announcement came for priority boarding, he stood with the rest of them. He moved without hurry, letting the louder people surge ahead. A woman brushed past him, perfume heavy, eyes already rolling as if his presence alone was an inconvenience. She didn't apologize. At the gate, the tension had already been there, coiled and waiting. Weather in the Midwest, a tight departure window, a crew that looked like it hadn't slept enough. The gate agent, a woman in her late 40s with reading glasses chained around her neck, scanned boarding passes with mechanical precision. Green. 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 When his pass scanned green, she paused. Not long. Just long enough. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then to his face, then back again. Her smile tightened, like a door closing quietly. "One moment," she said. Behind him, a man in a camel coat sighed dramatically. "Come on," he muttered. "Some of us have connections." The agent typed something. Fast, too fast. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Sir, can you step aside for just a second?" The man did. No protest, no eye roll. He stepped out of the line, backpack still slung over one shoulder, posture relaxed but alert. "What's the issue?" he asked. The agent glanced toward the podium, where a second agent had suddenly appeared, pretending to straighten brochures while very obviously listening. "There's a seat conflict," she said. "It should only take a minute." "I'm in seat 3, Alpha," he said. "Window." She nodded, but her eyes were already somewhere else. "Yes. That's what I see." "Then why are we doing this?" her face seemed to ask itself. They boarded him last. By the time he reached the aircraft door, the cabin was half full. The usual choreography was off. Bags slammed. Voices carried. A flight attendant near the galley argued under her breath with another crew member, her hands moving sharply like she was cutting the air into smaller pieces. He found his seat empty. 3 Alpha. Window. He sat down, stowed his bag, buckled in. Simple. Done. For a moment, there was quiet. Then the man in the aisle seat arrived, late 40s, expensive watch, jaw tight with irritation. He stopped short when he saw the window seat occupied, looked down at his phone, looked back up, smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Hey," he said. "You're in my seat." The man by the window turned. "I don't think so." "I'm always in 3 Alpha, the aisle man said, like it was a title. "Always." "On this route?" "That doesn't make it yours today," the window man replied, still calm. He gestured toward the seat number. "My boarding pass says 3 Alpha." The aisle man laughed softly. Not humor. Dominance. "Yeah. Mine too." They showed their passes to the flight attendant who had rushed over, breath already shallow, eyes darting like prey. She studied both screens, her brow furrowing. "This is strange," she said. The aisle man leaned closer to her. "I have a tight connection," he said. "I really don't have time for this." She nodded, too quickly. "Of course, sir." She turned to the window man. "Would you mind stepping into the aisle while I sort this out?" "I'd rather not," he said. "I'm seated correctly." Her smile flickered. "Sir, I'm asking you to cooperate." Around them, the cabin had gone quiet in that specific way that means everyone is listening. The woman across the aisle stopped pretending to read. Someone in row 2 lifted a phone a little higher. The window man felt it then. Not fear. Recognition. The familiar tightening in the chest. The shift from inconvenience to something older, heavier. "I am cooperating," he said. "I'm just not moving." That was when the call went to the cockpit. That was when the supervisors were summoned. Now back in the present, with the jet bridge still open and the cabin holding its breath, the second supervisor cleared his throat. He was younger, less confident. Sweat darkened the fabric at his collar. "The captain has concerns," he said, "about compliance." The word hung there. Compliance. Heavy. Loaded. The man in the seat looked past them, down the aisle. He saw the fear in the flight attendant's eyes, the calculation in the aisle man's smirk, the quiet outrage of passengers who wanted justice but not enough to risk anything themselves. He exhaled. "Then bring the captain," he said. The supervisors exchanged a look. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. The door to the cockpit was still closed, the plane still tethered to the ground. Outside, the engines continued their low, patient growl. Inside, something irreversible had already begun. The captain did not come. Instead, A voice crackled through the intercom, low and clipped, stripped of warmth. "Gate supervisors, I need the cabin secured. Close the door." The jet bridge shuddered as the hydraulic locks engaged. The sliver of cold air vanished. The plane sealed itself shut with a dull, mechanical thump that echoed through the fuselage like a verdict. Every head turned. The younger supervisor stiffened. "Sir," he said, his voice now thinner, "you need to comply." The man in the window seat did not raise his voice. He didn't even shift. His eyes stayed on the aisle, tracking movement the way a storm tracker watches pressure lines. "You just closed the door," he said. "That changes the rules." The aisle man laughed under his breath. "Unbelievable," he muttered, loud enough to be heard. "We're being held hostage by a nobody." The word nobody rippled. It moved from a seat to seat, not spoken aloud, but felt. The older woman in row 2 shook her head slowly. A man behind her whispered, "This is about to get bad." A flight attendant named Rachel stepped forward from the galley. Mid-30s. Hair pulled back too tight. Her smile had abandoned her somewhere between the cockpit call and the door closing. "Sir," she said, softer than the supervisors, "we're trying to de-escalate." The man finally looked at her fully. He noticed the tremor in her hands, the way she kept glancing toward the cockpit door, like it might open and swallow her whole. "You're doing your job," he said. "They're not." Her throat bobbed. She said nothing. The aisle man leaned toward the supervisors. "I fly this route twice a month," he said. "My brother sits on the board. This is ridiculous." The supervisors didn't look reassured. If anything, they looked worse. Behind them, in the rear of the cabin, a teenager held his phone chest high, recording. He wasn't hiding it. His face was pale, eyes wide, like he knew he was witnessing something he wouldn't forget. The intercom clicked again. This time the captain's voice was closer, sharper. "Sir, in seat 3, Alpha, identify yourself." The man inhaled slowly. He knew this moment. The pivot point. The place where silence either protected you or crushed you. He chose carefully. "My name is Thomas Hale," he said, "and I'm not the problem on this aircraft." A murmur ran through the cabin. The name meant nothing to most of them, which was exactly the point. The captain paused. You could hear it, the faint static hum stretching longer than it should have. "Mr. Hale," the voice returned, "you are refusing to comply with crew instructions. That is a federal issue." Hale tilted his head slightly. "So is removing a passenger without cause after sealing the aircraft." The aisle man scoffed. "Oh my God, listen to him. He thinks he's a lawyer." Hale didn't look at him. He looked at the seat back in front of him, eyes unfocused, mind moving fast. He counted the seconds. He always counted. Rachel took a step closer. "Captain," she said into the intercom handset she'd picked up, her voice tight. "The passenger is calm. He hasn't raised his voice. He hasn't threatened anyone." There was a beat. Then the captain responded, colder. "Rachel, return to your position." She hesitated. Just a fraction. Then obeyed. The supervisors shifted their weight. The older one cleared his throat. "Sir, last chance. Stand up." Hale looked at him. Really looked. Saw the sweat, the doubt, the fear of making the wrong choice and being the one blamed later. You don't want to be doing this, Hale said. Not a threat, a warning. The older supervisor's jaw tightened. We don't have a choice. You always have a choice, Hale said. You just don't always like the consequences. The aisleman slapped his armrest. Get him off the plane. That did it. The captain emerged from the cockpit. He was tall, late 50s, shoulders heavy with years of command. His face carried the practiced neutrality of someone used to deciding fates at altitude. When he stepped into the aisle, the cabin seemed to shrink around him. He stopped beside row 3, looked down at Hale, took in the plain jacket, the lack of accessories, the stillness. His eyes flicked, quick, assessing, then hardened. Mr. Hale, he said, voice firm, you are delaying this flight. No, Hale replied. You are. The captain's nostrils flared. Stand up. Hale stayed seated. Around them, time slowed. You could hear the ventilation system cycling, the faint click of a seatbelt being nervously adjusted. Someone swallowed loudly. The captain leaned closer. This is your final instruction. Hale met his gaze. Then document it. On record. State the reason you're removing me. The captain straightened. Non-compliance. With what? Hale asked. Be specific. Silence. The aisleman leaned forward, eyes gleaming. He's being disruptive. Hale turned to him for the first time. I haven't spoken to you, he said quietly. The words landed harder than shouting. The aisleman recoiled, just slightly, then covered it with a laugh. The captain made his decision. Supervisors, he said, escort the passenger off the aircraft. A collective intake of breath swept the cabin. Phones rose higher now. No pretense, no shame. Rachel closed her eyes. The younger supervisor reached for Hale's arm. His hand hovered, shook. Hale stood, not because they touched him, because he chose to. The sudden movement startled them all. The supervisors stepped back, almost colliding. Hale rose to his full height, taller than he looked sitting, broader, solid, the kind of presence that rearranged space. I'll walk, he said, but you're making a mistake. The captain didn't respond. They moved down the aisle together, a slow procession. Hale carried his backpack himself. Didn't let anyone take it. As he passed row 2, the older woman reached out, touched his sleeve. I'm sorry, she whispered. He nodded once. At the aircraft door, the seal hissed open. Cold air rushed back in. The jet bridge waited, sterile and bright. Just before stepping out, Hale stopped, turned back, looked at the cabin, at the faces, at the phones. This isn't about a seat, he said. His voice carried without effort. It's about who you think belongs where. Then he stepped onto the bridge. The door closed behind him. Inside the cockpit, the captain exhaled sharply. All right, he said. Let's go. The engines spooled up. In the cabin, no one spoke. In the terminal, as Hale walked between 2 supervisors toward a glass-walled office, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Once. Then again. He didn't look at it. Above them, the plane pushed back from the gate. And somewhere far beyond the airport, Phones were lighting up. Messages stacking, calls lining up. Systems taking notice. The flight was leaving without him. The consequences were not. The glass-walled office smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee, the kind of place meant to quiet people down by making them wait. Hale stood near the window, hands loose at his sides, watching the aircraft taxi away. The tail number slid past the terminal lights and vanished into the grey. Only then did he let out a breath. Not relief. Calculation. A security manager entered without knocking. Early 40s, corporate posture, badge clipped just right. His name read Mark Sullivan. He closed the door carefully, as if sound itself might escape and cause trouble. "Mr. Hale," he said, already choosing a tone that aimed for neutral. "Have a seat." Hale didn't sit. "I'm being detained." Sullivan hesitated. "You're being held for clarification." "That's not a legal term," Hale said. Sullivan's jaw flexed. "You were removed for refusing a lawful instruction from the captain." "After the aircraft was sealed," Hale replied. "Without cause." Sullivan glanced at the camera in the corner, then back. "You want to make this difficult?" Hale smiled faintly. Not amusement. Recognition? "I didn't start it." The phone in his pocket vibrated again. This time, he pulled it out. The screen lit his face for a brief second. He read the name. Didn't answer. Slid the phone face down on the counter between them. Sullivan noticed. His eyes narrowed, just a fraction. "Is someone expecting your call?" "Yes," Hale said. "They're very patient." Silence settled, the kind that presses in from all sides. Outside the office, the terminal kept moving. Wheels rolled, announcements echoed. A family laughed somewhere. Life continuing, unaware it had already stepped into a fault line. Sullivan cleared his throat. "We need to take a statement." "From whom?" Hale asked. "Me? Or the crew that decided a quiet man was a threat because he didn't look like their idea of first class?" Sullivan bristled. "That's not what happened?" "Then put it on record," Hale said. "Exactly what happened. Every word." Sullivan hesitated again. "Too long." He sat down instead, steepling his fingers. "This doesn't have to escalate." Hale leaned back against the window, crossing his ankles. "It already has." The phone buzzed a third time. This time, Hale answered. "Yes," he said. He listened. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. Focused. "Good," he said quietly. "No." "Don't call them yet." Sullivan's patience cracked. "Sir, you can't be on the phone right now." Hale ended the call and slid the phone into his pocket. "You're about to find out why that doesn't matter." The door opened again. A woman stepped in. Late 50s. Grey streaks pulled tight into a bun. She wore authority like a tailored coat, comfortable and heavy. Her badge read Linda Morales, Airport Operations Director. "Mark," she said without looking at him. "Give us the room." Sullivan stood immediately. "Ma'am, now." He left. Morales studied Hale. She didn't rush. She'd seen enough men bluff and crumble to know the difference. You made my morning complicated, she said. Hale inclined his head. You made a choice. Her lips thinned. I didn't remove you. You're responsible for what happens in this building, Hale said, including what you allow. She exhaled slowly. You want compensation? Rebooking? An apology? Hale shook his head. I want accountability. Morales laughed once, sharp. That's expensive. So is litigation, Hale said. Her gaze flicked to the camera. Back to him. Who are you? There it was, the question that always came late. Hale didn't answer immediately. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim leather wallet. Not rushed, not dramatic. He opened it and slid it across the counter. Morales picked it up. Her eyes moved once, then again. Slower. The color drained from her face. She closed the wallet carefully. Too carefully. Why didn't you say something sooner? Hale met her eyes. I wanted to see how far you'd go without knowing. The terminal announcement for boarding another flight echoed faintly through the glass. Morales swallowed. This could have been handled differently. Yes, Hale said. It should have been. She looked toward the door, then back. What do you want? Everything documented, Hale said. Every instruction. Every deviation from protocol. I want the cockpit audio preserved. I want the gate logs. I want the incident classified correctly. Morales rubbed her temples. You're asking me to burn people. I'm asking you to tell the truth, Hale said. If that burns people, that's not my fire. Outside, somewhere down the concourse, a shout went up, a ripple of voices. Phones chimed in quick succession. Morales's phone buzzed on her hip. She checked it. Her face tightened. You're trending, she said. Hale nodded. I know. The video had already escaped. The teenager's shaky footage. The aisle man's voice. The captain's command. 1,000 comments stacking. Some furious. Some cruel. All loud. The narrative forming without permission. Morales looked tired suddenly. Older. This airline doesn't need another scandal. Hale's voice softened. Just a degree. Then stop creating them. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. You'll be contacted. Hale took his wallet back. I'll be waiting. As he stepped out of the office, the terminal noise hit him like surf. People stared now. Some recognized him from their screens. Some just sensed gravity. He moved through them without hurry. At the curb, a black sedan idled. The driver stepped out, opening the rear door without a word. Hale slid inside. As the car pulled away, his phone rang again. He answered. Was it recorded? He asked. A pause. Then, yes, good, Hale said, watching the airport recede in the side mirror. Then let it play. The sedan merged into traffic. Behind them, inside the terminal, the airline began to realize the flight had landed somewhere far more dangerous than its destination. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, the narrative had already escaped the airline's control. In the forward cabin, the aisle man sat rigid, phone clenched in his palm, refreshing the screen over and over. The smugness had drained from his face. His jaw worked as he read. His brother's name appeared in the comments. His firm's logo trended in the wrong context. He tried to laugh it off, leaned toward the woman beside him, muttered something about people being dramatic. She didn't respond. She had turned her body away, eyes fixed on the window, like distance might absolve her by association. 2 rows back, Rachel, the flight attendant, moved through the aisle with practiced precision, but her hands shook when she reached for cups. Every smile felt brittle. She could feel the phones tracking her, could sense judgment forming in the air like static before lightning. She replayed the moment again and again in her head, the way the supervisors had stepped forward, the way the captain's voice had hardened. She had known then. She had known, and she had obeyed anyway. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds stared straight ahead, hands steady on the controls, jaw locked so tight it ached. The first officer had stopped making small talk. There was nothing to say. The chime of incoming messages from dispatch lit the console, one after another, until Reynolds silenced it with a sharp jab of his finger. "Company wants a statement," the first officer said quietly. Reynolds didn't answer. He kept his eyes forward, watching the horizon flatten into a thin, unforgiving line. He told himself he had followed procedure. He told himself the cabin had been at risk. He told himself this would pass. He did not tell himself the truth. On the ground, the sedan carried Hale through downtown streets, slick with late morning rain. Glass towers reflected a warped version of the city back at itself. He watched it all with the detached focus of someone already several moves ahead. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered immediately. "They're pushing the compliance angle," the voice on the other end said. Female, calm, precise, claiming operational discretion. Hale leaned back. "They always do. We have the cockpit audio. The timeline doesn't support it." "Good," Hale said. "Release nothing yet." A pause. "Public pressure is building fast." "Let it," he replied. "Pressure reveals fractures." The car stopped at a light. Outside, a man in a delivery uniform stared at his phone, shook his head, then looked up and met Hale's eyes through the glass. There was recognition there. Not fame. Something quieter. Understanding. Hale looked away. At airline headquarters, the crisis room filled in stages. Legal first, communications, operations. Faces tight, voices clipped. A screen at the front of the room played the video on mute, over and over. The moment Hale stood, the supervisors flinching, the captain's order, the door closing. "Turn the sound on," someone said. They did. The words hit harder than the images. A junior associate swallowed. "That's not good." The head of communications rubbed her forehead. "We need to get ahead of this." "With what?" Legal snapped. "An apology admits fault. Silence implies guilt." Communications shot back. At the head of the table, the CEO sat unmoving. Late 60s. Old school. He watched the footage with narrowed eyes, not at the man being removed, but at his own people. The way they crowded, the way they avoided specifics, the way power had been exercised without restraint. "Who is he?" the CEO asked. No one answered immediately. Legal cleared his throat. "We're still confirming." The CEO's gaze sharpened. "Confirm faster." Back in the sky, the flight attendant service slowed to a crawl. No one asked for drinks. No one joked. The cabin existed in a strange, suspended state, as if everyone sensed the ground shifting beneath them, even at 35,000 feet. The aisleman's phone rang. He answered, hissed into it, voice low and panicked. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I didn't know." He hung up and stared straight ahead. His knee bounced uncontrollably. When the seatbelt sign chimed off, no one moved. On social media, the story splintered into 1,000 arguments. Some defended the airline, some attacked the passenger. Most saw something larger than either. Comment sections filled with memory, with stories, with patterns people had felt but never named. The hashtag grew teeth. At a quiet law office across town, Hale stepped into a conference room where 3 people already waited. Screens glowed, documents lay neatly arranged. The air was calm, purposeful. "Timeline?" Hale asked, taking his seat. "Accelerating," one of them said. "Internal leak suggests disciplinary review." "Good," Hale replied. "Let them panic. And if they offer a settlement?" Hale shook his head. "This isn't about money." The room stilled. They all knew what it was about. Systems, precedent, the quiet normalization of harm. Across the country, the plane began its descent. The captain made the announcement, voice professional, measured, unaware that thousands were passing every syllable in real time. When he thanked passengers for choosing the airline, no one clapped. As the wheels touched down, a jolt ran through the cabin, physical and symbolic. Phones came out immediately. Messages flew. The aisleman remained seated long after others stood, like he feared moving would make him visible again. At the gate, uniformed staff waited. So did someone else. Rachel saw them first. Her breath caught. 2 suits, dark, federal, standing just off to the side, watching the jet bridge connect. The captain noticed them next. His stomach dropped. By the time the cabin door opened, the story had finished its first act. Hale watched the live feed from the conference room, eyes unreadable. He saw the agents step forward, saw the captain freeze, saw the ripple of recognition move through the crew. "Now," Hale said softly. The woman beside him nodded and hit send. Across screens, across cities, across a system long accustomed to quiet compliance, the next phase began. The agents didn't announce themselves at first. They stood just beyond the threshold of the jet bridge, hands folded, posture relaxed in a way that only comes from authority that doesn't need permission. Passengers streamed past them, eyes flicking up, then away, then back again. Recognition traveled faster than words. Captain Reynolds stepped into the doorway and stopped. For a brief moment, the world narrowed to the sound of cooling metal and the faint whine of auxiliary power. The captain's face didn't drain of color. It tightened instead, like steel drawn too fast. "Captain Reynolds," one of the agents said, producing a badge with a smooth, practiced motion. "We need a word." The aisleman froze 2 steps behind him. His carry-on slipped from his hand and thudded softly against the carpet. No one helped him pick it up. Rachel stood just inside the galley, her fingers clenched around the edge of the service cart. She watched the exchange with a strange mix of dread and relief. The thing she had feared was happening. The thing she had hoped for was happening. She wasn't sure which feeling scared her more. "Is there a problem?" Reynolds asked. The agent smiled thinly. "That depends on how you answer our questions." Passengers slowed as they passed, some openly filming now, some pretending not to see. The story had reached the point where denial felt dishonest. Reynolds nodded once. "Of course, right this way," the second agent said, gesturing toward the gate office. The captain hesitated. Just a fraction, long enough for the cameras to catch it. The aisleman tried to slip past them, head down. The agent's gaze snapped to him instantly. "Sir." "Hold on." The man stopped as if struck. "Me? Yes." I didn't do anything," he said quickly. "I was just a passenger." The agent looked him over, eyes clinical. "We'll see." Inside the gate office, the air felt thinner. The agents closed the door. The sound landed hard. "Let's start simple," the first agent said, taking out a recorder and placing it on the table. "At what point did you determine Mr. Hale was a threat to the flight?" Reynolds swallowed. He was non-compliant. "With what?" the agent asked. "With crew instructions." "Which instructions?" the agent pressed. Reynolds hesitated again. He refused to vacate his seat. The agent nodded slowly. "After the aircraft door was closed." "Yes." "And prior to that, had he raised his voice, made threats, attempted to access restricted areas?" "No." The agent glanced at his partner, then back. So the only issue was that he questioned the reason for being moved. Reynolds bristled. "That's not how it felt." The agent leaned back. "We're not interested in how it felt." In the terminal, the flow of passengers stalled. A crowd formed, phones raised openly now. Someone whispered, "That's him." Someone else said, "This is about that video." Rachel was pulled aside by a supervisor. "They want statements," he said. His voice shook. "All of them." She nodded. Her mouth was dry. The aisleman sat in a plastic chair near the window, hands locked together. His phone buzzed constantly. He ignored it. He watched the agents through the glass like prey watches a trap reset. In the gate office, the second agent turned the recorder off. "Captain," he said quietly, "do you understand that sealing an aircraft and ordering removal without articulable cause is not discretionary?" Reynolds stared at the table. "I was trying to maintain order." "You escalated," the agent said. "And you know it." Silence stretched. The hum of the terminal seeped through the walls. "Who made the call?" the agent asked. Reynolds looked up sharply. "I did." The agent held his gaze. "Did anyone influence that decision?" A flicker. "Gone too fast to deny." "Captain," the agent said, softer now. "This is your chance." Reynolds closed his eyes. In the crisis room, the CEO watched the live feed with grim focus. Legal sat rigid. Communications stopped typing. "Pause it," the CEO said. The screen froze on Reynolds's face, eyes closed, shoulders heavy. "Pull his file," the CEO said. "Full history." A beat. Then, "Yes, sir." Back at the airport, Hale stood just outside the security perimeter, speaking quietly into his phone. "No," he said. "I don't want him destroyed. I want it clean." He listened, nodded, then let the process work. A reporter spotted him and rushed forward. "Mr. Hale, can you comment?" Hale shook his head once. "This isn't about me." The reporter hesitated. "Then who is it about?" Hale met her eyes. "Everyone who's been told to move without explanation." Inside the gate office, Reynolds opened his eyes. "The supervisors pushed," he said. "They said there was a conflict. They said delay would cost us the slot." The agent wrote something down. Names. Reynolds gave them. The door opened briefly. Another agent stepped in. "We have confirmation on Hale," he said. Reynolds looked up. "Who is he?" The agent glanced at his partner, then answered. "He oversees federal compliance audits for domestic carriers." The words landed with finality. Reynolds's face went slack. "And," the agent continued, "he was en route to observe this route specifically." Outside, the aisleman let out a broken sound. He buried his face in his hands. Rachel closed her eyes. A tear escaped before she could stop it. The agent turned back to Reynolds. "You removed the one person on this flight whose job is to identify exactly this behavior." Reynolds sagged back in his chair. In the terminal, the crowd murmured as the agents exited the office. One stayed behind with Reynolds. The other approached the aisle man. "Sir," he said, "we're going to need you to come with us." "I didn't know," the man whispered. "I swear." The agent didn't argue. He simply waited. As they walked away, phones followed. Across the city, Hale watched the updates roll in. Names, statements, suspensions pending. He didn't smile. This was only the middle. The system was finally looking at itself, and it didn't like what it saw. By nightfall, the airline's internal systems were hemorrhaging. Emails stamped urgent stacked faster than they could be opened. Compliance alerts tripped like alarms in a sinking ship. At headquarters, the crisis room had gone quiet in the way rooms do when everyone realizes noise won't help. The CEO stood at the window, hands behind his back, watching the city blink on. He did not turn when legal cleared his throat. "We've placed the captain and 2 supervisors on administrative leave," legal said. "Pending investigation." The CEO nodded once. "And the route?" "Grounded for review." A pause. "How many?" 4 aircraft pulled. Possibly more. The CEO closed his eyes. He'd spent a lifetime building an airline that prized punctuality and polish. He had never feared turbulence. He feared rot. This felt like rot. Across town, in a quieter building with no logo on the door, Hale sat alone at a long table, the glow of a monitor painting his face in cool light. He watched the timeline assemble itself with forensic precision. Every decision, every handoff, every moment where someone chose speed over sense. His phone rang. "Yes," he said. "They're offering a statement," the voice reported. Carefully worded. "Regret, no admission." "Decline," Hale said. "Ask for records." A beat. "All of them?" "All of them." At the airport, the gate area finally thinned. The last passengers drifted away, clutching stories they would retell for years. The aisle man sat in a small interview room, the hum of fluorescent lights drilling into his skull. He stared at the table. He'd stopped checking his phone. He already knew. An agent slid a paper across to him. "Sign here. What is it?" he asked. "A statement," the agent said. "In your own words." The man's hands shook as he picked up the pen. He tried to write. Couldn't. "Am I in trouble?" The agent met his eyes. "That depends on how honest you are." In the crew lounge, Rachel sat with a cup of water she hadn't touched. Another flight attendant spoke quietly beside her, recounting a different flight, a different day, a similar moment. The words stacked. Patterns emerged. "I thought it was just me," Rachel whispered. "It never is," the other woman said. In the cockpit, alone, Reynolds sat staring at the instrument panel, hands slack in his lap. The power of the seat felt heavier now, not lighter. He replayed the choice, the tone he'd used, the relief he'd felt when the door closed. He had wanted the problem gone. He had not asked what the problem was. A knock came at the door. He flinched. The agent entered. "Captain, we're done for tonight." Reynolds nodded, stood, and followed. His reflection in the dark glass looked older, smaller. On the street outside, rain fell harder. Hail stepped out under the awning, the city breathing around him. A woman approached, phone lowered, eyes searching. "Mr. Hale," she said. "Off the record?" He considered her. The press had a way of turning moments into weapons. Still, silence could be its own distortion. Briefly. "Why now?" she asked. "Why take this flight?" Hale looked past her, toward the blur of traffic. "Because systems fail quietly until they don't," he said, "and because accountability shouldn't be scheduled." She nodded slowly. "People are calling you a hero." Hale's mouth tightened. "I was removed from a seat," he said. "That's not heroism. But you could have stopped it earlier." "Yes," he said. "And then none of this would be visible." The reporter hesitated. "Are there others?" Hale met her gaze. "There always are." Back at headquarters, the CEO turned from the window. "Call him," he said. Legal stiffened. "Sir, call him." Minutes later, Hale's phone rang. He listened. Long. Patient. When the CEO finished, Hale spoke. "You don't need forgiveness," he said. "You need correction. We can offer. I don't want a settlement." Another pause. "Then what do you want?" Hale's voice remained level. "Independent oversight. Mandatory retraining. Real consequences." The CEO exhaled. "That will cost us." "It already has," Hale said. Silence. Then, "We'll review." "Do," Hale said. "Quickly." The call ended. In the night, screens lit up with headlines, words like audit and suspension, and federal review spread. Stock tickers dipped. Analysts frowned. Somewhere, an executive poured a drink he wouldn't enjoy. Hale returned to the table, eyes scanning fresh documents. A notification pinged. New evidence uploaded. He opened it. The cockpit audio. He listened. The hum. The commands. The moment where calm tipped into certainty without cause. He closed his eyes, absorbing the weight. This wasn't about one man or one flight. It was about how easily authority confused itself with right. At the airport, the aisleman was escorted out through a side exit, avoiding cameras. He paused under the overhang, rain spattering his shoes. He looked up at the sky, empty now of planes he would never think of the same way again. Rachel drove home with the radio off, the silence loud. She thought about the passengers she'd apologized to without meaning it, about the times she'd swallowed questions to keep moving. Her hands tightened on the wheel. Tomorrow, she decided, she would not swallow. Reynolds sat in his car, engine off, staring at his driveway. He didn't get out. He couldn't yet. He felt something unfamiliar press in. Not fear. Recognition. In a building with no logo, Hale stood and stretched, fatigue settling into his bones. He packed his bag, methodical, unhurried. Before leaving, he looked once more at the timeline, at the names, at the fractures. He turned off the light. The night did not quiet. It sharpened. And somewhere within the machinery of an industry that had mistaken efficiency for justice, the gears began to grind against each other, slow and loud, signaling that the hardest part was still ahead. Morning arrived without permission. Hale woke before the alarm, the city still dim, rain clinging to the windows like a second skin. He lay still for a moment, listening to the building breathe. Pipes clicked. Somewhere, a siren faded. He sat up, already moving through the day in his head, already ahead of it. His phone lit with messages, stacked through the night. Internal memos, draft statements, a single word from the woman on his team. Ready. At headquarters, the airline's lobby filled with cameras before sunrise. Executives slipped through side entrances, collars up, faces set. The screens behind the reception desk looped a muted montage of destinations and smiling crews. The irony sharp enough to cut. In a conference room upstairs, the CEO faced the board. He did not waste time. "We are not waiting this out," he said. "We are fixing it." A murmur followed. Resistance, fear, cost, legal spoke. Independent oversight opens us to findings we can't control. "That's the point," the CEO replied. "Control is what got us here." Across town, Hale stepped into a different building, quieter, older, its halls lined with photographs of people who had changed systems without applause. He took a seat at the long table as the rest of the panel filtered in. No introductions. They knew him. "Begin," Hale said. The screen filled with timelines, decisions branching like fractures in glass, each node a choice, each choice a consequence. "This is not about punishment," Hale said, voice even. "It's about proof." He clicked forward. The cockpit audio played again, this time annotated. He let it run longer than before. The room shifted. Some leaned back. Others leaned in. "When authority cannot articulate its reason," Hale said, "it defaults to force." He paused. Let that settle. At the airport, Rachel sat across from an investigator, hands wrapped around a paper cup. Her voice wavered at first, then steadied. She described the tone, the looks, the pressure. She described the moment she knew and the moment she obeyed anyway. "What stopped you?" the investigator asked. Rachel swallowed. "Habit," she said, "and fear." The investigator nodded. "Write that down." In a suburban driveway, Reynolds watched his garage door lift, revealing the quiet inside. He didn't pull in. He stayed in the car, listening to the engine idle, thinking about the word he'd used. Non-compliance. How easily it had come to his mouth. How clean it had sounded. He shut the engine off and sat in the silence that followed. The aisle man woke to a dozen missed calls and a name trending next to his own. He scrolled until his stomach turned. His firm's logo released a statement. Distancing. Review. Zero tolerance. He stared at the screen until the letters blurred. He thought about the moment he'd leaned in, the way he'd smiled, the satisfaction he'd felt. It seemed unreal now, like a dream remembered from the wrong end. At the hearing, Hale listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was precise. He asked for logs, for training materials, for past incidents resolved quietly. The pile grew. A board member shifted. This could implicate others. Hale met his eyes. It already does. The city outside kept moving. People went to work. Planes took off. The world didn't pause for process. It never had. But something underneath it had changed. You could feel it in the way conversations sharpened, in the way silence broke sooner. By noon, the airline released a statement that said very little and promised much. The market dipped again. Analysts stopped speculating and started counting. Hale stepped out into the light and found the reporter waiting. "They're calling it unprecedented," she said. "It isn't," Hale replied. "It's overdue. Are you worried this becomes about you?" He shook his head. "It already moved past me." She hesitated. "What happens to the captain?" Hale considered the question. "He will answer for his choices," he said, "as we all do." In the crew lounge, Rachel watched the statement play on a muted screen. A senior attendant sat beside her. "You did good," she said quietly. Rachel shook her head. "I did late." The other woman squeezed her hand. "Late is better than never." Reynolds walked into his house and placed his keys on the counter, like he always did. He stood there for a long time, staring at them. He thought about the passengers, the crew, the man he'd ordered removed. He thought about the power he'd carried and how little it had weighed in his hand at the moment he needed it most. In the hearing room, the panel adjourned. Hale gathered his papers, methodical. A man approached him, older, eyes sharp. "You're changing how this works," he said. Hale looked at him. "I'm reminding it." Outside, clouds broke. A thin slice of blue opened above the buildings. Hale paused, tilting his head up, letting the light touch his face. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His phone buzzed. A message from his team. "Decision drafted. Oversight approved. Conditions attached." Hale typed back one word. "Proceed." At the airport, a new training memo circulated. It wasn't polished yet. It spoke plainly. It named fear. It named habit. It named the cost of choosing speed over sense. People read it slower than usual. The aisleman packed a box from his office, eyes down, co-workers avoiding him with practiced neutrality. He caught his reflection in the glass. He didn't recognize it. He wasn't sure he ever had. Rachel clocked out and walked past the gate where it had started. She stopped, took a breath, then kept going. Reynolds sat at his kitchen table as the sun moved across the floor. He picked up a pen and began to write. Not a defense, an account. Hale walked back into the building with no logo and closed the door behind him. The room waited. The work waited. He took his seat. The system had spoken back. Now it would have to listen. The hearing did not end with applause. It ended with signatures. Pens pressed into paper. Dates written carefully. Language chosen with the kind of caution that comes from knowing history would read this later and ask who flinched. Hale watched it all from the far end of the table, hands folded, eyes steady. He had learned long ago that real shifts rarely announce themselves with noise. They arrive quietly, dressed as procedure. When the last signature dried, the room exhaled. One of the panel members cleared his throat. This will trigger reviews across multiple carriers. Hale nodded. It should. Outside, cameras waited, hungry for a face, a sound bite, a moment they could shrink into something consumable. Hale exited through a side corridor instead, the way people do when they're more interested in outcomes than recognition. By afternoon, the ripple became a wave. Internal bulletins leaked. Training manuals resurfaced. Old complaints, once buried under polite language and quick settlements, crawled back into daylight. Patterns sharpened. What had once been dismissed as isolated incidents now read like chapters of the same book. In a regional operations office 2 states away, a supervisor read the memo twice, then closed his door. He thought about the last time he'd raised his voice at a gate agent for slowing boarding. He thought about the passenger he'd labeled difficult because he wouldn't make eye contact. He thought about how easily authority slipped into habit. His stomach tightened. At headquarters, the CEO stood before the press. He did not smile. "We failed," he said, voice clear, unembellished. We failed to apply our own standards. We failed to protect our passengers with fairness. And we failed to listen when someone questioned us. The room stilled. "We are instituting independent oversight effective immediately," he continued. "Mandatory retraining for all flight deck and ground leadership. Clear protocols for escalation. And consequences for violations, regardless of rank." A reporter shouted a question about cost. The CEO didn't hesitate. Integrity costs less than erosion. The clip went viral. Rachel watched it on her phone while waiting at a crosswalk. Cars rushed past. The light changed. She didn't move right away. The words sat in her chest, heavy and strange. For the first time since the flight, she felt something loosen. In another city, Reynolds sat across from an investigator, his statement complete, his posture rigid. The questions came measured, relentless. He answered each one. He did not deflect. When it was over, he walked out into the sun and felt older than he had that morning. The aisle man stood in line at a coffee shop he'd never visited before. No lounge, no priority, just a paper menu taped to the wall. The barista didn't recognize him. The anonymity stung more than the scrutiny. He ordered, voice low, hands unsteady, and waited like everyone else. It felt like a sentence he hadn't known existed. Hale spent the afternoon reviewing secondary reports, similar language, similar triggers, the same word appearing again and again. Disruptive. He circled it, then crossed it out, replaced it with specific behaviors, raised voice, threat, physical movement. The difference mattered. A junior analyst hesitated at the doorway. "Sir," she said, "we're getting pushback." Hale looked up. "From where?" "Several carriers. They're concerned about precedent. Hale leaned back. So am I. She frowned, confused. He continued, I want the precedent to be that power requires clarity. She nodded slowly. Left. By evening, the first suspensions were announced. Names withheld. Positions acknowledged. The internet did what it always did. Speculated, judged, moved on. But something underneath didn't. At a training center outside the city, a new session convened early. No speeches, no slogans, just scenarios. Questions asked without answers supplied. Instructors instructed less, listened more. People shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, awake. Rachel attended on her day off. She sat in the back, arms crossed, absorbing. When the instructor asked what escalation looked like, her hand rose before she could stop it. She spoke once, clear. The room listened. In a modest apartment, Reynolds packed a box from his office. He paused over a framed photo of his first flight, younger, grinning, full of certainty. He placed it face down in the box and closed the lid. He didn't know what came next. He knew what couldn't. Hale received a message from an old colleague. You started something. Hale typed back. It was already there. He left the building as the sky dimmed, the city's edges softening. On the sidewalk, a man stopped him. Middle-aged, ordinary. You were on that flight, the man said. Yes, Hale replied. The man hesitated. Thank you. Hale studied his face, saw gratitude mixed with something else. Relief. He nodded once and kept walking. That night, another carrier released a statement. Then another. Language shifted. Less defensive. More precise. Lawyers frowned. Operations teams adjusted. The machinery groaned, but moved. At home, Rachel opened her laptop and wrote. Not a complaint, a reflection. She didn't send it yet. She read it once, twice, saved it. The aisle man sat on his couch, phone dark, television muted. He thought about the moment he'd spoken, how small it had seemed, how large it had become. He felt something close to regret, not for the consequences, for the ease with which he'd acted. Hale reviewed the final report draft before bed. He changed a word here, removed a phrase there. He stopped when he reached the conclusion, read it slowly, then left it untouched. Outside, planes crossed the sky, their lights steady, orderly. Inside them, people slept, argued, waited, hoped. The system that carried them forward was imperfect, always would be. But now it had been forced to look at itself in full light. Hale turned off the lamp. Tomorrow, the work would continue. Not as a story, as a standard. The consequences did not arrive all at once. They arrived in layers. The first layer was procedural. New language replaced old shortcuts. Checklists grew longer. Decisions slowed where they had once rushed. In briefing rooms across the country, supervisors cleared their throats before speaking, choosing words with care. Authority learned to explain itself. The second layer was personal. It showed up at kitchen tables and in quiet cars idling too long. It showed up in the way people avoided mirrors or sought them out. It showed up in apologies, practiced aloud, and never delivered. Reynolds received the letter on a Tuesday morning. He read it standing at the counter, coffee going cold in his hand. It wasn't dramatic. No condemnation. Just facts. Findings. A determination that his command privileges were suspended pending retraining and review. He set the letter down and felt a strange relief. The waiting had been heavier than the loss. At the training center, he sat in the back row with others who carried the same posture, straight backs, quiet eyes. They watched a scenario play out on the screen. A passenger questioned a decision. The instructor paused the clip. "What happens next?" she asked. Reynolds spoke before he meant to. "You ask why," he said. The room turned. He swallowed. "You don't assume." The instructor nodded. Again. In another city, the aisle man stood in a small office with a view of nothing remarkable. Human resources spoke in careful tones. Policy. Conduct. Brand risk. He listened without interrupting, hands folded like he was in church. When it was over, he signed the papers and left without asking questions. He understood now how fast flaws disappeared. He walked to a park and sat on a bench, phone heavy in his pocket. He drafted a message he didn't send. He deleted it. He watched children chase pigeons and felt the unfamiliar weight of being unimportant. It did not crush him. It taught him. Rachel received an email inviting her to join a working group. Crew perspective. Voluntary. She read it twice, then once more. Her heart beat faster than it should have. She accepted. Later, she called her mother and spoke without rushing. For the first time in weeks, she slept through the night. Hale spent the day with data, not headlines, not interviews. The quiet work of reading and listening. He noticed how language changed behavior, how clarity reduced friction, how accountability traveled farther when it wasn't shouted. A message came in from the oversight board. First quarterly review scheduled. Scope broad. Expectations high. Hale typed back a single line. Good. The third layer arrived in public. A late-night show opened with a monologue that wasn't cruel. It was thoughtful. A morning paper ran a long piece tracing patterns across industries, not just aviation. A radio host invited callers who had been moved, silenced, dismissed. The lines filled. People spoke carefully at first, then more freely. The word disruptive lost its magic. At headquarters, the CEO walked past the old mission statement and stopped. He read it again, slower than before. He ordered it revised. Not to soften it, to sharpen it. At the airport where it had begun, a new sign went up near the gate podium. Simple. Plain. If you don't understand a decision, ask. We will explain. Some people scoffed. Others took pictures. A few read it and felt something shift. Hale visited the terminal one afternoon without announcing himself. He sat where anyone could sit. He watched the flow. The hesitations, the moments when someone paused instead of pushing through. He did not interfere. He observed. A gate agent approached him. "Sir," she said, polite, uncertain, "is there anything I can help you with?" "No," Hale said, "but thank you for asking." She smiled, relieved. Reynolds finished his final session and stood with the others as certificates were handed out. Not promotions, permissions. The instructor met his eyes. "What did you learn?" she asked. Reynolds answered honestly. "That certainty feels good until it's wrong." She nodded. Then you're ready. The aisleman received a message from his sister. Not angry, not forgiving, curious. He replied carefully. They met for coffee days later. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, he did not defend himself. It was the first conversation in a long time that felt real. Rachel sat in a conference room with people whose names she had only seen in emails. She spoke once, then again. Her voice steadied. The room adjusted. Notes were taken. A decision shifted. She felt the quiet thrill of influence earned, not demanded. Hale watched a draft of the final public report take shape. He approved it with minor edits. He insisted on names where appropriate. He insisted on context everywhere. He refused to let it be neat. That evening, he received a message from the reporter. "Off the record," she wrote. "Did you expect this?" Hale considered. He replied, "I expected resistance." She sent back. "And now?" "Now we measure," he wrote. "And we keep measuring." The fourth layer came later, almost unnoticed. It appeared in the way a supervisor explained a delay to a tired parent, in the way a captain acknowledged uncertainty instead of masking it, in the way a passenger asked a question without being labeled difficult. It appeared in small choices repeated. Months passed. The story cooled. New stories took its place. That was how it was supposed to be. What mattered stayed. On a clear morning, Hale boarded a flight without fanfare. He took his seat. He placed his bag under the seat in front of him. He buckled in and looked out the window. The city slid away beneath the wing. A flight attendant paused beside him. "If you need anything," she said, then added, "and if you have questions, just ask." Hale nodded. "I will." As the plane lifted, the engine steady, the cabin quiet, Hale closed his eyes for a moment. Not in rest, in acknowledgement. The system was still imperfect. It always would be. But it had learned to hear itself think. And that, he knew, was how change endured. The plane leveled off into smooth air, the kind that felt earned. Hale watched the wing cut through a pale sky, sunlight breaking clean across the metal, and thought about how easily things could have gone differently. One decision earlier, one word swallowed, one silence chosen over friction. The story would have vanished before it ever existed, folded neatly into routine, unexamined and unresolved. Around him, the cabin breathed as one. A man adjusted his reading light. A woman closed her eyes. Somewhere behind him, a child laughed, sharp and sudden, then hushed. Ordinary life continuing inside a machine built on trust. Hale rested his hands on his thighs, feeling the faint vibration of engines through the seat. He did not feel triumph. He felt weight, the kind that comes when responsibility does not end with exposure, when attention fades but consequences must remain. Below them, cities stitched themselves together with highways and rivers, patterns that only made sense from a distance. Hale had learned long ago that systems were the same. Up close, they were noise and habit and personalities colliding. From above, they revealed design, flaws included. The flight attendant passed, offering water. Hale accepted, nodding his thanks. She moved on without lingering, professional, calm. He wondered if she knew the story, if she felt its echo in the way she did her job now. He hoped she did. Not because of him, but because awareness changed posture. When the captain spoke, his voice was steady, unhurried. He acknowledged weather ahead, explained the plan, invited patience. No performance, no authority for authority's sake. Hale listened, noting the difference. It was subtle. It mattered. He thought of Reynolds, somewhere in a different cockpit now, hands lighter on the controls, words chosen more carefully. He thought of Rachel, likely mid-briefing, her voice no longer tightening when she raised it. He thought of the aisle man, walking a different pace through a life rearranged by consequence, learning that comfort and entitlement were not the same thing. He thought of the executives who had learned that brand protection without integrity was just delay. Of the supervisors who now paused before acting. Of the passengers who felt, maybe for the first time, that asking why did not automatically make them a problem. The plane crossed into brighter air. The seatbelt sign chimed off with a gentle note that sounded less like permission and more like trust returned. Hale took out his notebook and wrote a single line. Not a slogan, a reminder. Explain before you enforce. He closed the notebook and slid it back into his bag. This was not an ending. It never was. It was a continuation, quieter now, embedded in process and habit and memory. The kind of change that didn't announce itself again, because it didn't need to. As the flight began its descent, Hale felt the familiar pressure in his ears and swallowed, grounding himself in the physical. The runway lights appeared ahead, long and precise. The landing was smooth, controlled, intentional. When the plane came to a stop and the engines wound down, there was no applause. There didn't need to be. People gathered their belongings and stood when it was their turn. No rushing, no jostling. Just motion, guided by shared understanding. Hale waited. He always waited. When he stepped into the aisle, the flow adjusted around him without resistance. He walked off the plane and into the terminal, merging with the crowd until he was just another figure moving forward. Outside, daylight spilled across the pavement. A breeze cut through the open doors. Hale paused for a moment, breathing it in, then continued on. Stories like this don't end when the cameras leave. They end when behavior changes and stays changed. When power learns to speak clearly. When sordo stops being mistaken for agreement. If this story moved you, let it move others. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. Comment below with 3 words. Justice was served.